Hello everyone. So this tutorial is for Monday the 27th when I'll be away, and this time I'm demonstrating pen and wash painting a white Japanese anemone. I rarely use the pen for white flowers, but they are very prolific in my garden at the moment, these lovely Japanese anemones, so they're constantly asking me to paint them. So I thought I'd give it a go. I'm going to use a fine pen, and I'm going to wash in a background. And I'm going to use these colours. And the background is going to be a lovely sort of washy blue, which I'm also going to allow to bleed into the flower shapes. So remember that the flowers are already going to be depicted, so you don't have to be too particular about where you put shadows and allowing blending to happen, and allowing some of your background into the actual flower. And it's going to be good practice for putting down a wash. People are having a little bit of trouble with the washes, and maybe going a little bit too heavy with them, as I do. And also it's good practice for background, which is another thing that people have a bit of trouble with. So let's see how it goes. I've got a vase of, or a pot actually, a terracotta jug in front of me with some white ones in. And I've put these here for you to be able to see. So I'm just going to draw one to start with so that you can get the idea of the drawing process. So what I would do is get the pen going, and it is a 0.5, and it's they call it dark grey, but it isn't particularly dark. So I would start with the centre, and then just scribble in all little stamens, giving myself space between the centre and where the stamens sit, and don't be too precise about the shape, and don't get down there and put every little single one in as you see it. And then maybe a few of the little stalks. The more you do with the pen, the less you've got to do with your wash. And the reason I put that in before drawing the petals is because I don't want to foreshorten the petals. And if I don't leave that space, if I go straight in and do the petals, I don't leave enough room to put the stamens in, and so therefore I'll be foreshortening them, and that doesn't look good. So this just helps to... I'm holding the pen quite loosely as always, and on its side a little bit so that I get lost and found lines, so that I'm not getting really hard, heavy lines going on. And I've started off by drawing the two that I can see the whole of there. Okay. There's another one that sits here, and they have, each one is a different shape to the next, so that's going to look out for that, because that's going to create interest in your finished painting. And this is a really big one, but I've actually drawn it a little bit smaller because otherwise it isn't going to look very balanced. So look out for things like that, look ahead. Don't always paint exactly what you see, because sometimes it just isn't going to be right in your picture. So don't get fussy with it, just quick little drawing like that. Can't really see a stalk, but the stalk would come from there, and they're very rarely straight. And just be careful of the thickness of your stalks as well. They also have these little, lots and lots of these little buds going on within the plant. So really a good idea to put lots of those in. and very few leaves apart from at the bottom, which isn't going to really feature into my drawing, but there's a huge stalk that comes like that, and then other flowers coming and buds coming from it. So that's the way it always sits, and there are some tiny leaves that actually sit in that area there, and then big ones at the bottom. So that's my quick little sketch just to show you the procedure for just drawing that. And I'm going to use ultramarine blue because it's a lovely bright blue and I think will work well. And you can work wet on wet with your background, or you can just wash it in. And I'm just going to do a little bit at a time to keep control. I won't mind if some of it bleeds into and over the edge of my work that I've just done. So keeping that edge nice and wet so that the paint floats away, and so that the main part of the background is going to be sitting right next to the petals. And while that's still wet, I'm going to actually put some water where I would like maybe some of that background to bleed in, and if it won't bleed in, just give it a bit of a help. So I'm kind of using that background for shadows and marks within my drawing. So quick little wash there and carry on round, and you'll see what happens when it's dry. So lots of things going on in the background there, and I actually negatively painted around another one. You could put that kind of thing into the background and just show a few petals here and there just to loosen the whole thing up. But this is my drawing, so I'm going to now start popping the background round there. I doubt that I'll manage to get all the way round without having to stop, because I'll run out of time. So I think I'll be stopping and starting, but that's fine. I've got a lot of space here. Right. It's quite an adventurous drawing, actually. I'm not sure that I had in mind to do anything quite so full as this, but I really love white flowers and I got a bit carried away. These are a lovely flower, and I haven't had much of an opportunity to paint them this year. I've also got some pink ones out there, which would be nice to do sometime. So starting my background right up next to the petal shapes, and using a nice big brush so that I don't fiddle, and letting that background float away. Don't take it right to the edge because it isn't necessary, and it only takes the eye right to the edge sometimes when it isn't best thing for it to happen. So if you've got tiny space, don't worry about wetting it first. In fact, I'm not going to do a lot more wetting first because it'll just take me twice as long, but you may find it easier because the paint won't go past the water edge. But it's going to be quicker for me just to pop this background round like this, and then I'll work on the flowers after I've done the background. So always underneath the flowers you can go a little bit deeper, because that's where it would look more in shadow. So it's a very wet wash that's going down here. But let's just try letting some of that colour create some shadowy marks for me within my flower. Just pulling some of that back in. And as I've said, the drawing is there, so painting like this isn't going to interfere with the drawing at all. What's happening now is it's just getting a little bit more interest, and I'm just going to put quite a bit of shadow behind there because it's going to have a lot of shadow being cast from this little flower in front. And that's another thing while I'm on that subject there. Try to overlap some of the flowers within your bunches so that you don't have a little space between every single one, because it's harder to look at. What we've got to do is make it easy for the viewer and enjoyable for the viewer to see. Right, so I'm going to stop here because I've got quite a lot to do and I'd like you to see the finished result. So I'm going to just stop and carry on with my background and come back. Right, I've popped some background around and the texture of the paper has created some nice texture marks for me as well. So not too much to do there. But you could use salt if you wanted to, or whatever. You know, drop water back in, make particular marks. Anything that we've covered before would work. Right, so now I'm going to pop some of these little buds in and some of the centres of the flowers. So try to vary, if you have a lot of things like this to do, try to vary the tones and the colours, leaving white paper. And I have noticed actually there's a little bit of pink going on in some of those little buds, so I'm just dropping a bit of that in as well. And let's try to create variety and not get carried away, popping the same little marks down everywhere we go. So I'm just dropping some alizarin back on there, which is making it nice and sort of pinky. So I'm just using the point of my brush here and then popping a little bit more depth around one side to give it a more sort of rounded shape and like a ball, if you like, because it is actually standing very proud of the actual flower. And a little spot of light on each one would really help as well. So try to remember that. If you have these and you paint these, I don't know what that means. Never know what that means. I have good intentions of sticking to a half an hour each week, but that doesn't seem to work out. It all depends on what I've got to do, doesn't it? So a bit more pink into this one. Let's make this a little bit brighter in the focal area here. And I also see pinks, although these are white flowers, I can see quite a bit of pink in the stalks. So that's why I've popped a little bit of pink on top of the blue into my background to try and bring those colours out. Right, I'll just stop while I finish the rest of the buds and then I'll work on the stem. So now we should be able to brighten it all up a little bit with popping the stamens in, which are a lovely deep yellow and orange. So I'm just going to dot those in, leaving some light, the white of the petals coming through from behind. That's going to help these little stamens to stand proud of the actual flower, but trying not to be too monotonous again. So dropping a little deeper colour in here and there. There's a little faint flower behind there. So that's working quite well to actually bring them out and create some brightness within the whole picture. And that should be picked up again in my terracotta pot. So think about the flowers that you put into particular pots. It's always got to be something that works well and looks right. Okay, so not very much more to do now. Just going to put that up there because I may have to just move myself to pop in those little. Just going to pull a few of these little colours down a bit. Pop a little bit of blue shadow in, I think, just here and there, to show that there's some shadow on those little stamen stalks. Right, now I need to mix up a terracotta. I've tried to remember that it is just a wash, and so I haven't got too detailed. I've popped the stalks in really quickly, and so you can still see the drawn lines. But not as prominently as you could before, so it's, I think, working okay. So nice terracotta colour mixed together with alizarin and burnt sienna, and I think I'm going to put a bit of the orange in just to bring those colours out and brighten it. Oh yes, nice. I'm going to wet my pot so that I can just wash the colour on the top, and hopefully it will not end up too deep a colour, and also look natural, because terracotta isn't the same sort of tone all the way through the pot. Terracotta does tend to vary, and anyway, even if it doesn't, I like to see it that way. It's got a little spout at the top here, and I'm actually going to just paint the top rim and the spout of the jug without wetting it first, because it's a little bit trickier to get that shape. And working around the buds and the flowers. Let a little light come back into it as well. Same thing here, I think. I think I seem to have got some orange on my hand. So this is a nice simple technique which I think, you know, you can really enjoy, especially if you are a beginner and good at drawing but still not too happy with the painting. It's a lovely way just to create a picture by doing your drawing with the pen and then washing in the colour. Right. So now I want to just finish the pot. I think my pot is reasonably symmetrical, but with terracotta you don't have to be so strict about getting it symmetrical, as long as it looks fairly good. Because pottery isn't always, and sometimes it looks nice when it's actually not quite so perfect. The texture of the paper is going to help on the pot as well, quite a bit. So I'm going to try and keep it lighter through the centre so that it will give a sort of rounded, bulbous appearance. So just water on my brush and just bring it through. I'm not going to see exactly what I've got here until it's dry. Mixing a little bit of the blue with the terracotta here, just to make it deeper within the jug, where it's strong in shadow. Maybe a similar thing here. When you're drawing a vessel, and you can do, if you're right-handed, you tend to be able to get that side in really quickly and easily. And then you've got to work that way, which is more difficult if you're right-handed. And the opposite if you're left-handed, obviously. So a little tip is to then turn it, do the one side, draw the one side, and then turn your picture upside down, your pad upside down, to do the other side, and you'll find it will become easier to get it symmetrical. Right, a bit more shadow under there while it's still damp, being cast by the petals and the rim. And I'm not going to be able to do very much more because I'm running out of time, which is a good thing, but at the same time I think I've more or less finished. Just soften those edges, but anything that's an object like this has to be grounded, so I'm going to have to do something about that. So using colours that I've already used to give a nice colour for grounding. And I've, as you see, kept it lighter this side and balanced because the flowers were more this side and not so many there. So I've put more background on to create a balance, but also hopefully making it look a little bit more interesting. I've got a little splodge of orange here. So don't forget your little sponge to just wash that orange away. Right, let's pop this shadow in underneath the pot and let's ground it. Otherwise it's going to be floating, isn't it? So a mixture of the colours I've already got here. Trying to make it slightly darker. And letting it just float in that wetted area. And really you don't need to do very much more than that, apart from making it even darker where you see more shadow right underneath the pot, and then maybe just soften these edges away and leave it. Created a nice shape there, and just a little bit of shadow and a little bit of grounding. Okay, you can then allow it to dry and go back in if you feel you need to, and put more pen work on, or in fact a little bit more shadow. This isn't really dry yet, I shouldn't be doing it at the moment, but you could see perhaps that it needed a bit more depth there, just to make that rim stand out a bit further forward. But I would allow it to dry before you start thinking about doing that sort of thing. Okay, so let's see if I can just show you more closely what it looks like when you paint around a drawn flower with the pen. And it's obviously got to dry yet and will look slightly different when it has, so don't judge your pictures until they're dry. And hope you all have a good week, and remember to still send to me, although I will be away. I'll be happy to receive your work while I'm there. And next time I'll be demonstrating a simple, we'll be into October and the flowers won't be around so much then. So I'm thinking that I'll perhaps demonstrate a simple landscape painted in watercolour, but then giving the option of popping some pen work on the top afterwards to see how the thing can change and whether it's necessary. But it's another technique that can be used and be useful. Okay, so have a good week, and I'll see you when I get back. Bye.